don't know if I have to try to share your file, Shane, and see if it'll let you. I'm sure it will. I don't know.
All right, let me see how to do this. I'm a little rusty on it, so let me see. All right, can you all see this?
I can't.
You can?
Yes.
Okay, good, good. All right. Are you ready?
Let me make sure I got my timer going here. I'm ready. You may begin.
All right, so let me start. All right, so A Look in the Cannery Row. It was written in 1945, of course, by John Steinbeck. All right, so here's a little bit of literary and historical context.
The slide isn't moving,
It's
Shane.
not moving with it. Can you see this?
Uh, it's
Yeah, I think you're presenting the PowerPoint gallery and not the slideshow.
You can't see this?
No, yeah, we can see that. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, let's just do it this way. All right. So here's some literary and historical context to the novel. So Steinbeck enjoyed the modernist movement, which was a literary movement that started in the early 1900s and it ended in the early 40s. Cannery Rose literature style can be called, and this is something that I found pretty interesting here, there's a term for it, called slice of life literature. And this is because Steinbeck was known to successfully capture how life truly was in the eras that he was writing about. This is one of several novels that actually improved the economy and the landscape in Cannery Row, California, due to the historical and the literary significance. And most of these contributions are from Steinbeck himself. Steinbeck actually in Cannery Row, he started to pull away from agrarian, the farming types of thinking there. And he started to focus more on what we call social criticism in this work. And to introduce Lee Chong, and we'll get to him in a moment, in 1851, the Chinese immigrants crossed the Pacific and they settled in a place called China Point. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, but and establishing the fishing industry in Monterey. Here's just a little bit of biographical information. This work was published in 45 at the end of World War II, but the characters in Cannery Row are actually dealing with depression, era thoughts, and struggles. Because if I'm not badly mistaken, this is set in 38 roundabout. So, and going off on the cannery information, the first cannery was built in 1908. And of course, when World War One started, they had to boost their product to keep up with the demand. And of course, the sardine industry started booming. There were some ups and downs. But then, of course, when World War II started in 39, they had to start with the sardine production again. In 1930, Steinbeck married his first wife, Carol, and they lived in Pacific Grove, which was next to Cannery Row. So here we see someone who we should all be familiar with at this point is Ed Ricketts. And this is a character, a real life person who Steinbeck chose to portray as Doc in this novel. So Ricketts and Steinbeck in real life actually studied biological mysteries in the Great Tidal Pool. And in Cannery Row, Ricketts is portrayed by Doc, as I just said, who worked at the Western Biological Laboratory. And then I, of course, included a piece from the book. Everyone who knew him was indebted to him, and everyone who thought of him thought next, I really must do something nice for Doc. Here is Lee Chong, who is one of my favorite characters in the book. And this is actually a picture of the building around today, and it's the Wing Chong building. Lee Chong is a businessman who runs a store with almost everything the people of Cannery Road need. And stemming off of Doc again, Doc buys his beer here, and almost everyone else in the community buys from Lee as well. And then I included a piece from the book. Lee's finger came to a gentle rest on the change mat. He was beaten. He knew that. There was left to him only the possibility of saving face, and Mac was likely to be very generous about that. Lee said, "You like pay lit my place? You like live there same hotel?" And that's on page 14. So this is just a bit of how Lee operated. He put a lot of thought into his actions and before he made decisions here. And then, of course, we have Mac and the boys. Mac was the elder, leader, mentor, and to a small extent the exploiter of a little group of men who had in common no families, no money, and no ambitions beyond food, drink, and contentment. But whereas most men in their search for contentment destroy themselves and fall wearily short of their targets, Mac and his friends approached contentment casually, quietly, and absorbed it gently. Here's a short summary. Cannery Row tells the story of Mac and Hazel, Eddie, and Gay, who are a group of jobless men who, as we know, they decide to rent, and I put rent in quotations because they are notorious for not really paying anybody for anything. So it was an old fish mill building who the original owner was depressed. He committed suicide after giving the building to Lee Chong for his debts. So they end up um, fixing up the place, and they call it the Palace Flop House and Grill. Mac and the boys, they create a plan to do something nice for Doc, who is, of course, the owner of Western Biological Lab. And their plan is to give him a party. But things go wrong, and of course, they try to get Lee Chong's truck started. It breaks down, and Gay gets put back in jail for a while. And then after all of these issues happen, they decide to restart, try to replan this party again. But Doc arrives home late. He discovers his place is in a mess. Everybody's upset. From that time onward, I guess you could say a dark cloud hovers over the row, and a flu epidemic breaks out, and other events occur. But eventually, things get better for them, and Doc cures Mac and the boys' dog. And then they decide to pick things back up and do something nice for him again. And then Dora, the local madam, she tells them to throw another party, but instead of sneaking in his place when he's gone, she tells them to plan it so Doc can actually attend the party this time. The boys are much more careful with their planning and the execution of it. The party works out, and then the novel comes to an end. Doc's cleaning up his place, and he's just reflecting on life in general. So some of the themes in the novel is nature of true virtue, the value of human connection, because there is a lot of connection in this story, the inherent duplicacy of life, and evil interference, because every time they try to do something good, evil tends to always be present and interferes with their doings. And here's does anyone have any questions thus far? Is it appropriate to ask this right now, Dr. Yeager?
Yep.
All right. Does anyone have any questions or comments thus far?
No, sir.
All right. All right. So here's a few key passages, and I thought were pretty interesting that stood out to me. In my book, it's on page 5. Cannery Row in Monterey, in California, is a poem, a stink, a grating noise, a quality of light, a tone, a habit, a nostalgia, a dream. Then it says in page 18, what can it profit a man? And I'd like to discuss this if we can. What can it profit a man to gain the whole world and to come to his property with a gastric ulcer, a blown prostate, and bifocals? Mac and the boys avoid the trap, walk around the poison, step over the noose, while a generation of trapped, poisoned, and trussed up men scream at them and call them no goods, come to bad ends, blot on the town thieves, rascals, bums. Our Father who art in nature, who has given the gift of survival to the coyote, the common brown rat, the English sparrow, the housefly, and the moth, must have a great and overwhelming love for no goods and blot on the town and bums and Mac and the boys, virtues and grace and laziness and zest, our Father who art in nature. I think that is a interesting passage there. And does anyone have any comments about this quote before we go any further? All right, we can circle back to it.
Yeah, I'll comment, Shane.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting quote. Steinbeck's definitely talking about modernity here, right? And
Yes.
how we all get so wound up in our lives and our jobs and things like that. Sometimes we get so caught up in that we kind of forget um, who we are,
Right.
what's important. And here, Mac and the boys are. Steinbeck actually, I don't know if you put it on your next slide. He actually calls them philosophers at one point. These are the true philosophers.
Yep.
Um, these are the guys who have no craving, right? You can almost kind of think of them like Buddhists in a way, right? They have no craving, no desires. They just live, right? There's kind of a beauty in that, especially in a world where we're so concerned about our jobs, consumerism, uh, things like that.
Right. And I take it as like the common man, the simple man, someone who isn't greedy and, like you're saying, not caught up in the fast pace of life, but people who are approached with problems, they find solutions, they overcome them, and they move on. And we can see that, even with the party where they had all of these issues, but still yet though they wanted to do something nice for Doc. So they overcame their issues and whatever life threw at them, and they persevered.
So if I can just kind of piggyback off of that,
Sure.
um, It seems like he does this multiple times throughout the book, right? Where he's talking about, or he does like contrasting juxtaposition, where we've got he's talking about them being blot on the town thieves, rascal bums, and then he also compared that he also said that they were the true philosophers. Um, I don't know if it was after this point or just I think it was like right after this where he says, you know, you're looking into this bar and you see gamblers, whores, and whatever, and then if you turned around and looked back into it and said you saw saints and you know, preachers and whatever, and you'd be talking about the same people. Um, and then with the party itself, how you said they're just trying to do something nice for Doc, and it just gets out of hand, and then even whenever it does work out and Doc enjoys himself, it still got out of hand. So like no matter what, he's calling on yin and yang in a kind of sort of way throughout the book.
Right, right. Yep. I didn't think of that, Bron, the yin yang. That's a nice touch to it. But
Yeah, in a way, he's almost trying to de-emphasize the human being here, right? Like there's no real class differences. We're all the same, as Abron said. Um, but also even the human being's place within nature, right?
mm-hmm.
Like he like there's so much description spent to the tide pool, to like all the creatures that are around there, all the life that's brewing. Human beings are almost just another form of life, no different than the rest.
Mm-hmm. But another section within this passage here, and it stems off of the previous readings, and I think it really started with To a God Unknown. And Our Father who art in nature, with the nature talk, and it all centers around nature, and because here he is, he's comparing um, these people to animals. You know, he's comparing them to the gift of survival. You know, in the coyote and the brown rat, the sparrow, the housefly. So, you know, he's going down the line there to a great coyote, even down to the small moth or even the housefly. So I mean, he's grouping them all together and just in nature and from the greatest to the least among them, and it's just interesting wording there how he compares us to nature. So, any comments?
But I want to come back to the Our Father who art in nature, but I kind of want to wait it until I guess we start talking about the frogs and stuff too.
Okay. All right. So key passages continued. It has always seemed strange to me the things we admire in men, kindness and generosity, openness, honesty, understanding, and feeling, are the concomitants of failure in our system. And those traits we detest, sharpness, greed, acquisitive, tongue-tied, acquisitiveness, meanness, egotism, and self-interest, are the traits of success. And while men admire the quality of the first, they love the produce of the second. I think that is a pretty good explanation of human nature there. And you know, we look for the first things he lists. You know, the honesty, the understanding, and all of that. And as a society, a lot of people, they, like he says, they detest the greed and the meanness and the self-interest. And then he says those are the traits of success. We admire the quality of the first, but my goodness, since the others are the traits of success, then of course it brings some good, is what he's saying there. So I guess that goes back to our philosophy course, Dr. Yeager, where we were talking about white and black, no gray area. Um, I assume you could incorporate this into that, because when we were talking about the candy mar, somebody's starving, and they they don't know what to do. They have to do what they have to do to get some food. So um, it's self-interest there, and it is breaking the law. It's a complete disregard to the standards that we as a society have put in place. But we love the produce of the second. And does anybody have any comments on that?
Yeah, it reminds me of Nietzsche. This quote reminds me of Nietzsche, right?
Mm-hmm.
Remember Nietzsche's philosophy was Christian morality, especially, is has kind of made us weak, and he proposed the Superman, right, who would invent his own morality to kind of overcome those weaknesses. Those things you're quoted there: kindness, generosity, openness, honesty, understanding. Those are what we would oftentimes associate as like Christian traits, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're known for that, when it comes to capitalism, right, you're a failure.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a dog eat dog world, right? So if you're going to be a success in business, you can't show those traits.
Right. And I guess this is when my car salesman rant can come into place. When you're doing business, you're trying to sell a car, you really can't be generous. You really can't be open. You really can't be honest. You really can't be understand. I mean, really, in all aspects of business. I mean, if you want to make a fortune, if you want to line your pockets, then some people just completely, throw those things out the door, and then they pick up the second set there. Greed and ego, and of course serving themselves, because like Steinbeck says here, they found those um, things to be the traits of success. So, all right, so I have two simple questions, but I feel like they can lead into some pretty good discussion. And so, first one, can we compare the main characters in Cannery Row with people we know in our area? And the second one, what are your thoughts on Lee Chong? All right, so going back to the first question there, do you feel like these characters are pretty similar to people that we may know here? Bron, Hunter, Kelvin?
Yes, and so you can find those types of characters everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, no, no matter where you go, people are going to be the same. There's going to be the same um, diverse cast of people. So, I mean, yes, in a way. I just don't know who to compare them to specifically.
All right, anyone else?
I feel like there's definitely like some people that came to mind while reading through, and not like that they entirely encompass like all of the characters' traits, but just that I could see like certain aspects of people I knew and like certain moments throughout the story where the characters are talked about.
Like when I look at these characters, like the major characters, um, going back to me, I mean Mac, Lee, and Dora and Doc, it's like you kind of think of your traditional like college, what's the word I'm looking for? Clique. Like you got different people from all different backgrounds, all different traits, but when you put those traits together, they come together as a team and they work together, etc. If you get what I'm saying.
Right, right. When I think of Mac and the boys, I think of those people in our area who have addiction issues. And I don't know why, but like with Mac and them, they don't have a job, but they're good people and they try to do what's right. And they have flaws, of course, and those who suffer with addiction, they have flaws, but they're good people. And they like, with the party there, we got to do something good for Doc. He's a good guy. And you have those people who some people may say, oh, they're terrible people. What do they contribute to society? They give you their shirt off their back. I mean, good people. So that's for some reason that's what comes to my mind, and I guess that's why I included the question, is because it's I mean it's a very open question there. It's not really detailed at all, but I feel like it's a good question for conversation because I think that each character in the novel, we could think of someone in our head that closely resembles them. And so, what are y'all's thoughts on Lee Chong?
I was just going to say real quick, Shane, on that question. Yeah, I see your point about addiction here. Like that part where it talked about how Mac and the boys can never do anything right, no matter the
Yes,
intentions.
right,
Um,
right.
I imagine that a lot of people in that situation probably feel that way.
Yes,
Um,
yes. Yeah, thanks for bringing that to my mind there. Yes, I for some reason I failed to include that part, but yes. I mean, and even with one of the fellas, and you're gonna have to refresh my mind here, who would fill in for the bartender when he was out, and he had the um, jug under the table with the funnel in it, and when they were finished with their drink, he would just pour it into the container there and bring it home. I mean, they were simple people, but they had their issues, and like you said, they tried to be good and tried to make their mark, and but still yet though they had a lot of problems, and it goes back to one of the key themes there, evil creeping into every good thing that they try to do. But what are your thoughts on Lee Chong? Do you think that he's a good business person? Do you think he's a good person in general? Do you think he's not? Do you think he's just in his decision making? Bron?
Um, I don't think he. Wait, hold on. Give me. Come back to me. Let me pull up my journal because I wrote.
I think I think when you talk about a businessman, business owner, um, I believe he is good. I believe his actions are just the way he carries himself as a businessman. But when you step out of that realm, um, you know, he's more of like a risk taker in a sense. I would say that's the best way for me to kind of put it.
Okay, okay. I think of it when the boys come in and this is after the previous owner of that building had paid off his debts by giving it to Lee Chong, and he goes and kills himself. And the boys come in and they ask about the building, want to get it to live in. And Lee Chong is standing behind the counter. He's tapping his ring on the change mat, and then he feels surrounded. But he tries to think before he acts, but at the same time, he felt surrounded and he gave in. He told him, he said, $5 a week to stay there. He knew he wasn't going to get the money. He knew that the boys weren't really um, reliable to pay people back. But and even when he lets them borrow the truck to go and get the animals for Doc, he's strong in a business perspective, but he's human, and he gives in, and he tries to be understanding, tries to have a connection with the rest of them. I hope that makes sense there, but that's how I sense him. Um, any comments on him?
So I'm back. I got my journal pulled up. So that's the exact kind of thought process that I was going with.
Mm-hmm.
He's a smart businessman. He's not shrewd. He's not extremely greedy. He's got a little bit of greed with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he sees the loss of profit from like the $5 a week that he's not going to gain.
Right.
He sees that as a gain anyway because he's already covering the profit loss from his goods store.
Right.
And then since he's letting them stay there without paying him, they become loyal and protect him in any sort of way that they can. And
Yes.
then in chapter 2, it said, like he might be evil, balanced and suspended by good.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of see it kind of the opposite way, where he's a good character, but because he has a shopkeeper role, he has the responsibility of owning and operating his own store. He's balanced and suspended by the inherent greed that comes with the capitalism, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But as the character himself, like the actual character of Lee Chong, without delving into his personality or anything, obviously it's it's a little racist, but at the same time, it's very true to the Asian people and Asian culture of the time.
Right.
And it could have been way worse considering this book was written in 1945.
Mm-hmm.
With everything that was going on globally at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But that's
but especially with the, I think they were called the Tong Wars that happened just a few decades prior to all of this, and fights with the Chinese people who were there. And like you said, there were a lot of racist things that were in there, but like you said, it was true to the era, and that's how things happened. But going back to Lee as a businessman, he was strategic in his thinking. Like you said, he let the men stay there. They became the protector of the building, keep it from burning down, keeping people from busting the windows out of it. He knew that he was going to get his profit back because of all the people who would come and buy from him. So he knew sooner or later he'd get it back. But yeah, he was very strategic in how he went about things. But there were times when he just plainly came out and said no. So he was generous in his giving. He was understanding at times, but there were just some things that he says, in other words, I guess if you read between the lines, that you're not going to keep running over top of me. You have to understand, I'm a business person. I got to make money. I'll help you um, as I can, as I seem fit to do, but you're not going to continue to run over top of me in that way. But yeah, Dr. Yeager, would you like me to stop sharing my screen and we'll just continue the conversation?
Sure.
Okay.
That was very good.
Thank you. But good conversation there. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I just want to show you guys some pictures real quick. This was some pictures at Cannery Row I took a few years ago. Here's a picture of downtown Monterey, so where Cannery Row is. You see the big the crosswalk here. It has the Monterey Canning Company. Um, Today, if you go there, it's really touristy, in no small part due to Steinbeck. Right, a lot of Steinbeck effect sort of fans go there today to look over the place. Um, this is a picture of Ed's lab, Pacific Biological Laboratories. So that's the lab that it keeps talking about. Just a really simple wooden building. I've actually never gotten to go inside the lab. It's only open during the weekends for tourists to see. Um, but today there's a giant aquarium next to it, the Monterey Aquarium. And if you guys have ever been to the aquarium in Tennessee, it's kind of like that. Um, Giant, really nice aquarium. They got just about every kind of fish in there you can think of. Here was a Cannery Row wax museum, which was interesting. Here's a picture of here's a picture of the statue of Steinbeck and all of his friends. A lot of these friends, like Ricketts is here. There were several other ones. George Albee was another one of the friends in this group. They kind of started this friend group in Cannery Row, this group of intellectuals, and they would all get together and talk about stuff like philosophy and science and things of that nature. And lots of the stuff we've talked about in the class, like Jim Casey's philosophy, for instance, in Grapes of Wrath, like that was inspired in no small part due to the friend group here. They would all get together and have these conversations. And this is a really nice. Of course, we got the raven here on Steinbeck's head. I don't know what that was kind of ominous. And there's a bust of them, which you can see, there today. And there's the picture you showed, Shane, of Lee Chong's store. Um, I think today in that store, that store is, you can just find a lot of to the spirit of Lee's store, you can just find a lot of random eclectic stuff there. Like I think that Buddha statue that I have in my office, I think I bought there at Lee Chong's shop. Yes, that's right across the street from Doc's lab. Then I just took some pictures of some fish I saw in the aquarium. There's a octopus that they had there. Um, then I ate at Bubba Gump Shrimp whenever I was there. So really cool town to get to visit. It's about an hour and a half south of San Francisco. So if you guys ever go to San Francisco or the Bay Area, Monterey's a pretty short drive up the road. It's definitely a great place to visit.
Would you mind opening up Ling Chong's shop again for me?
Yep. Right here.
So up there, where the sun is, it doesn't say Ling Chong shop. It says Wing Chong. I find that interesting because that's how, like, the L's and R's are usually the main problems that foreigners have, especially Asian foreigners have speaking, in the English dialect or in the English language. So I find it interesting that in the book, he had no problem pronouncing L's, but he never pronounced an R. But it's written Wing Chong here.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know why he changed the name. That's something I would have to research. Um, yeah, I'd say this was a hard task. Anytime you write a book of fiction that's loosely about real life people, you kind of got to watch what you're doing, I guess. You don't want to get sued or something.
Oh, well, of course. I thought it was an interesting tidbit.
Right.
Kind of like an Easter egg type deal, I guess.
Yeah, it's real. It's really a magical thing to get to go there after reading the novel. They have stuff about, like here in this picture, they have a whole exhibit on the Monterey Canning Company. Fortunately, since it's a big tourist place today, they don't really have the sardine factories going or anything like that. Yeah,
I don't see the whorehouse either.
no whorehouse there. Yeah.
I did have a couple questions about the book, though.
Okay.
Who was the woman in La Jolla that he found? Was that just a random woman he happened to come across?
Are you talking about the dead woman that he found while he was
Yeah.
looking for? Yeah, that's a really odd part of the book, and I don't know if that was. I don't think that was based on a real life story or anything. I think that just might have been something that Steinbeck came up with for the book. What do you? Then the book kind of drops it after that, right? It's kind of
Right.
like it's kind of this image that you have in your mind, and then boom, like let's just move on with the next chapter where Mac's preparing for the party, right? It's kind of an off-putting chapter. What do you? I don't know. I'll deflect that question to you guys. What do you think Steinbeck was doing in that passage? Why did he show this woman dead in the ocean? Um, we can kind of ground it. Let's kind of ground ourselves in the text here, just to kind of give you a reminder. It's in chapter 18. Chapter 18. It's pretty close to the end of the chapter. like 3 or 4 paragraphs before the end of the chapter. I'm using Library of America version. I think some of you guys might be using Penguin Classics. It says it was good hunting that day. Doc got 22 little octopi, and he picked off several thousand sea cradles and put them in his wooden bucket. As the tide moved out, he followed it while the morning came and the sun arose. The flat extended out 200 yards, and then there was a line of heavy weed-crusted rocks before it dropped off to deep water. Doc worked out to the barrier edge. He had about what he wanted now, and the rest of the time he looked under stones, leaned down, and peered into the tide pools with their brilliant mosaics and their scuttling, bubbling life. And he came at last to the outer barrier where the long, leathery brown algae hung down into the water. Red starfish clustered on the rocks, and the sea pulsed up and down against the barrier, waiting to get in again. Between 2 weeded rocks on the barrier, Doc saw a flash of white under water, and then the floating weed covered it. He climbed to the place over the slippery rocks, held himself firmly, and gently reached down and parted the brown algae. Then he grew rigid. A girl's face looked up at him, a pretty, pale girl with dark hair. The eyes were open and clear, and the face was firm, and the hair washed gently about her head. The body was out of sight, caught in the crevice. The lips were slightly parted, and the teeth showed, and on the face was only comfort and rest. Just under water it was, and the clear water made it very beautiful. It seemed to Doc that he looked at it for many minutes, and the face burned into his picture memory. Very slowly he raised his head and let the brown weed float back and cover the face. Doc's heart pounded deeply, and his throat felt tight. He picked up his bucket and his jars and his crowbar and went slowly over the slippery rocks back toward the beach. And the girl's face went ahead of him. He sat down on the beach in the coarse, dry sand and pulled off his boots. The jar and the little octopi were huddled up, each keeping as far as possible from the others. Music sounded in Doc's ears, a high, thin, piercingly sweet flute carrying a melody he could never remember. Against this, a pounding surf-like woodwind section. The flute went off up into regions beyond the hearing range, and even there it carried its unbelievable melody. Goose pimples came out on Doc's arms. He shivered, and his eyes were wet the way they get in the focus of great beauty. The girl's eyes had been gray and clear, and the dark hair floated, drifted lightly over the face. The picture was set for all time. He sat there while the first little spout of water came over the reef, bringing the returning tide. He sat there hearing the music while the sea crept in again over the bouldery flat. His hand tapped out the rhythm, and the terrifying flute played in his brain. The eyes were gray, and the mouth smiled a little or seemed to catch its breath in ecstasy. So, what's up with this random chapter, right, where Doc kind of finds this girl in the ocean? Like, how does this relate to like the novel's themes, do you guys think?
The only thing that I see that relates is there's another dead body.
Right? To add on to all the other people who die through the book.
So you'll see it in my my journal. There's plenty of different chapters where I had no idea why the chapter was in there. I didn't know what was going on. But I kind of thought that all these dead bodies were going to add up to, I thought it was going to add up to Doc being framed for murder accidentally because of the party in the next scene here. Or in chapter 20, I can bring it up. It says, no one has studied the psychology of a dying party. It may be raging, howling, boiling, and then a fever sets in and a little silence. And then quickly it is gone. The guests go home or go to sleep or wander away to some other affair, and they leave a dead body. And then the chapter just kind of ends without saying anything else about a dead body. Who died at that party? What's going on?
I don't think anybody died at the party. I think it was just like a metaphor. Um, like at the end of the party, you just have somebody passed out like they're dead.
Uh, uh,
Yeah.
I was looking for more.
Could the dead girl be symbolic of, because she was young, correct? Yeah, she was young. And then it could be maybe symbolic of the um, canning industry, the how it has its ups and its downs, and it was dying out. Maybe it was somewhat young, like the boom was young of the sardine industry there. And since she was young and the business boom may have been young, maybe it was just symbolic of that, a dying out of something that really isn't old. But I mean, and since she was young, and I'm not going to say this to sound very heartless or anything, but usually when someone young passes, there's more of an impact. You know what I mean? Because it's just sort of a shock. You know, when someone's older, then you can somewhat see death creeping in. But someone who's young, it's just a shock to everyone. So maybe it was just either what was taking place in the industry or a foretelling of what was soon to come. I don't know that. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think that's a good thought, Shane. I'd never thought of it that this passage in that way before. I guess the way I've always read the passage is just thinking about the people, all the people that go through life, right? And you don't know their story. You don't know their voice. Um, who knows what happened to this girl, right? Maybe she was trafficked. Um, maybe somebody murdered her. Um, we don't know, right? Just think about all the people. I guess just think about all the people in history, right? A lot of people who left the world, and there's really no good explanation for why. It's one of those mysteries. Um,
But if I can say something on that,
mhm.
we would again have to kind of ground ourselves in the text, right? So it said that she was trapped in the crevice. That's the only assumption that we can go on, was that she went out swimming, got trapped there, and drowned. Um, so I'm trying to think of some sort of connection between that and the tide pools. I don't like how she was trapped there during. I'm guessing
Low tide.
she probably went out during low tide and then got trapped during high tide, which is how she would have drowned. And then Doc had to, like, that would be the only time Doc come by and see her, was because he was going during to trying to find um, the right time for low tide.
Yeah.
I don't see any I can't. I'm having trouble finding symbolism though. I'm just thinking too literally.
No, I think sometimes we try to read things too symbolically. Um, sometimes the text says what it says, right? Hunter, Kelvin, any of you guys got a thought on this?
No, I ain't really got too much.
I am not very positive that I know what he's trying to get at by including this in the story. But I mean, it doesn't bother me that it's there. Like, it's well written. And I mean, if he is at the beginning, like the intro, in my book at least, he talks about just like opening the book and letting the words like fill the page instead of him writing them. If that is an experience that he experienced like during the time writing this book, if there was something similar to that, it probably would stand out to you and you probably would write something about it. And if you never found another tie-in to put it back in the story, then that's fine with me.
I'm just taking the exact opposite approach. It's bothering me.
Right.
Well, I mean, I can certainly see your point, Dr. Yeager, with sometimes a lack of words and silence makes more of an impact than filling pages full of words. And I can see how withholding her story ties in with Steinbeck's uh, view on Mac and the boys, of just being there. Society may look down on them, really doesn't, give them much thought. What are their contributions to society? What are they doing with their lives? But like you said, maybe Steinbeck withheld her story to show just what you said. Some people are here, no one knows anything about them. But it's almost like a call to action there to make connections with people, find out their story. Because honestly, that's a problem today. There are people who come into this world and who leave out of this world like her, and no one knows anything about them. They just get thrown into unmarked graves. And it's sad, and you could tie this into the homeless community. They just, in other words, they just disappear. They're here and they're gone. And it's sad. I mean, it really is. So I can see that being a call to action to find out people's stories. And yeah, the lack of words there is profound.
Yeah, it's curious that he spends time talking about all these other random characters and their stories on what happened to them, but he's silent here. Right? It is really curious.
His scene transitions, where he's talking very intricately, describing the animals. Like he's very intimate with how these animals behave, how they act, and he's using them as when I was reading the scene transitions, it felt like I was watching a movie with the way he was describing, the stink bugs lifting their butts in the air, and then describing the baby octopi in the pool, and then leaving very little, like no answers to some of these things in the book. Who was the scary Chinaman?
Right. Yeah, the one who walks across the road every night, and the kid goes up to him and says something racist, and then he scares the kid.
Yeah,
Couldn't that be? I'm sorry, Brian. Go ahead.
I thought we were gonna go like, I thought Steinbeck was gonna venture into horror realm with that. No, I got super intrigued. just based off of that alone, I was willing to give this book a 5-star rating. I'm like, I'm all in. And
I'm
now
with you. I'm
I'm
with
lost.
you. I'm with you on that. I like comedy and horror stuff. So, I mean, if you tie them two together, it's pretty good. I'm sorry, Brian. Go ahead. I just want to add that.
No, that was it. I'm lost as to who this character was. I wanted him to make another showing, maybe show up at the party or something. I don't know.
Could it be very similar to this girl they find dead? Maybe she was just just like him, you know, someone who people had a lot of I guess you could say prejudice against, because you know, with the racist remarks from the kids, they don't just out of the blue become racist. It's instilled in them,
Right.
you know. So maybe the conversations and the teachings that were taking place at the time were, you know, the Asians who were here, they're below us. You know, who do they think they are? You know, just thoughts like that um, may have been running through their minds, and so no one ever really wanted to go up and find out anything about him. So I guess that could just be another instance of people coming into the world. No one wants to know their story, and out of the story they go.
Okay, but if you started talking to a guy and then his face disappeared and turned into a hole and you just saw whatever he showed this child, this poor little kid, I wouldn't want to fucking talk to this guy either.
I mean, here's my question: did that really happen? Or is it almost like biblical text, you know, where you have to read it in depth?
That was something else I wanted to get into. Going back to that, Our Father who art in nature.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
there was, there was the famine there where everybody was getting sick. There was the plague of frogs, going across the town. There was, there wasn't exactly like a rain of blood or anything, but I mean, everybody was kind of struggling to get food. It almost seemed like another point of view that I was looking at while reading this book was Steinbeck trying to recreate the plagues of Egypt in a more modern text style. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, but wasn't that one of the plagues with frogs?
But exactly, and then that's what I was
Yes.
saying. And everybody was getting sick. Even the dog was damn near dying. Um, it felt like I was reading, the Old Testament again.
Here's something else that, because I look it up, I just had to have a refresher. But in some of the plagues here in Egypt, you had, um, of course, the water turning to blood. You had frogs. Then you had lice. Remember the boy that came into Doc's office?
Yes, Frankie.
Yes. And he got the lice out of his head. Then flies. He mentions flies. The
Uh,
livestock pestilence.
with the dog having fleas and ticks and getting sick. Yes.
Hmm. And then darkness was one of them, and the killing of firstborn children. So just there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of comparisons there.
Locusts.
Locust.
I think that would make a great paper idea.
Bet it would.
Yeah, you guys are giving me something new to think about. I've never thought of this before. Yeah, that's the beauty of a class like this. We learn and talk about it and learn from each other. So, yeah, you should pursue that thought, Ron. Maybe that would make a good paper idea for you,
I'm claiming it.
right?
10 Plagues of Egypt in the Cannery Row.
Yeah, I've never heard that talked about in any of the conferences or any of the articles I've ever read. That's a brand new idea. So,
What was the Sweet Thursday you said was the
sequel, yeah.
sequel? Okay, so if I can't find all 10 Plagues of Egypt in Cannery Row, I'm just going to assume that the rest of them are there.
Yeah, it's a pretty delightful little book too. Um, it, yeah, I wanted to put it on the syllabus, but I had to put East of Eden on there, and that took up almost a month by itself. My choice was put East of Eden on there, or put like two or three more smaller works. I chose the big one. But especially if you guys got these, it's Sweet Thursdays in these. Yeah, the if I had to say another theme in the novel, I would probably say isolation is probably a big theme. Just like this is a theme that has followed us throughout all of these works we've read, right? To a God Unknown, isolation was in there. Of Mice and Men, it was in there. Grapes of Wrath, that was in there. I think I would argue, this is probably Steinbeck's best take at it, though. Um, just how isolating life is for people. Um, Doc even though everybody in the community loves Doc, Doc kind of feels sad and isolated. Um, he's definitely not a cheery guy throughout the book. He is, yeah. He feels. They talk about how Ed Ricketts was like this. He can never really develop a solid relationship with a woman, right? He was very I don't know what the word. He just jumped woman to woman pretty much. Like he never really did develop a relationship, a great relationship with like a marriage or anything. Um, so yeah,
So
he is definitely isolating, bro.
on the woman aspect, how did Henry the Painter scare a woman away from, like he pulled Doc's woman away from him by telling her a scary story about his dream? That doesn't make any sense to in human psychology to me.
How do you mean?
Like Steinbeck knew, like he was very much in love, right? He knew what love felt like. He knew how human courtship and interactions work.
He 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 himself was going through a nasty divorce at this time that he was writing this. This is when he divorced Carol. Yeah.
Okay, I did not know that.
Yeah, he divorced her shortly after Grapes of Wrath. That's when he had the affair with Gwen. Gwen was an actress, and she was his second wife. Yeah, he himself was going through a lot in the love department during the time.
I knew that was going on. I just didn't put that into context with the book. It makes a little bit more sense now, I guess.
Yeah, shortly before this book, the book before this was Logged from the Sea of Cortez. I didn't put That's one of his most important works, but I didn't put it on the syllabus just because it's not fiction; it's nonfiction. But she was on that voyage. Like that whole book is about science, and like science and that's very much a science and philosophy book. It was co-written by both Ricketts and Steinbeck, but the feelings towards Carol were so bitter that he actually deleted her from the book and didn't even mention her that she was there. So yeah, very much a bad divorce between the two. It said I read in Working Days that part of the resentment between them was when Steinbeck was writing something, he subscribed to the theory that if you had sex while you were writing, that zapped the creative drive. So there was lots of frustration from Carroll in that regard because he would go whole months without showing any intimacy while he was in the middle of writing something. So that's definitely, but along with the cheating, right? That's definitely part of why they split.
Was the cheating during the abstaining for writing process?
Say that again, Hunter.
Did the cheating take place while he was like abstaining from?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
That's interesting.
I mean, that would defeat the entire purpose of the entire process.
Yeah, I think by the time he cheated, he was emotionally done with her because they fought so much that, of course, she was a famous star and stuff like this too. She was the opposite of looks to Carol. Carol was a brunette. Gwen was a blonde. Needless to say, Gwen and Steinbeck's relationship didn't last long either. It was finally with his third wife, Elaine, where he found his true happiness. Elaine was his soulmate, I guess you could say. But Carol's definitely a tragic figure if you go back and read through the biographies and stuff. Just because she had so much to do with his success. Like I told you guys in the previous weeks, if it wasn't for her, he might not have ever gotten to A God Unknown and Mice and Men off the ground. She even gave him the title, The Grapes of Wrath, right? So she helped him grow. Then, right when he was enjoying the fruits of his success, that's when they split. And of course, he was extremely successful after their split too. But it's a shame. It's a shame, really. One of the yeah, Steinbeck definitely had some demons in his closet. That one. But the sense of isolation in the book, right? Steinbeck himself probably felt some isolation while he was writing. And there's so many other isolated characters. Gay, right? Gay is isolated from his wife. Right? They have some type of quarrel, and rather than fight it out, right, Gay just decides to go live in the palace flop house. Um, all the girls who work at the brothel, right? They they are all isolated. They're with somebody intimately all day, but at the end of the day, they get nothing out of that. They're isolated. The girl who was in the ocean, right? That's probably the ultimate case of isolation in the book. Um, I think it goes back to what Shane said earlier. Um, Human connection is one of the themes, right? The call for human connection. There's so much lack of that throughout the book. And the lack of it is what causes evil. How do I follow up that fault, right? What do you guys think of that? Do you see this lack of connection as being part of the core of this book? Is that what causes these evils? Is the lack of connecting with their fellow human beings?
I'm a firm believer that we are made to connect with others. We're all in this globe together, so we've got to get along, work together, talk with one another. And I believe that if we find ourselves in a reclusive state, that causes a lot of mental issues. And mental issues leads to physical issues because people, they hoard up their thoughts. They won't, if you don't have someone to vent to, if you don't have someone to talk with about problems that you may be facing, then when your mental problems go into becoming physical problems and you start acting out. So I think that, yes, what you're saying, that isolation can definitely lead to evil. 100%.
Yeah, physical evil as well as mental evil too.
I'm going to go ahead and agree as well with both you and Shane. Um, the lack of connection with your human man does do some quite a bit of damage. And I would also like to say thank you for saying um, that woman kind of represents the ultimate form of isolation in the book, because without that, I was going to be upset about it. It was eating at me as to who she was.
Do you kind of view it that way now too?
Now that you say that, yes, and thank you.
I would agree with all of you guys as well. But it does seem to be like a very common theme. I wrote a paper about like social connection between humans last night and then read the book right after it. So I was probably already like more inclined to notice stuff like that when I got to the book, but that did seem like a very important theme.
Yeah, we could mention several other characters here in this discussion too. Frankie, the young boy who works for Doc, he's abandoned by his mother because Frankie's kind of slow, right? So Frankie, in his desperate need for human connection, steals the Saint George clock and gets arrested for it. Um, and when Doc says, "Why did you do that, Frankie?" Frankie says, It's because I love you." Right? That that was one of those gut punch, sad moments in the book. Uh, Frankie has no human connection with anybody except Doc. Um, the guy at the beginning who kills himself to get the Palace Flop House, right? He sells the land to Lee. Um, why would he do that, right? If he didn't feel isolated. I think this book is the ultimate expression of this theme of isolation that we've talked about. Everybody in the book is alienated in some way. Um, Maybe that has something to do with modernity. Right? In a way, this is one of Steinbeck's best modernist pieces, because modernism is always about fragmentation and isolation. Like if you guys read Hemingway or Faulkner or Joyce or Woolf, uh, this is a pretty common theme throughout this whole movement. And the modern world, think about it even today, right? The modern world causes isolation. Like Steinbeck talks about the Model T Ford in the book, right? How so many children were created inside the Model T Ford, right? That's in industry creeping into our lives. Right? The Model T Ford changed the world forever as far as how we interact with other human beings. Think about today, this thing, right? It's supposed to connect us, but does it really? Um, think about maybe you're at a restaurant, right? Or maybe you see a couple sitting in a restaurant. One of them's on their phone, right? That's always kind of sad to see, right? Is there really true human connection there? I would say if anything, the phones have isolated us. I know when my brother was at WVU as an undergrad, he only stayed there one semester. He got terribly depressed, but even like you think to yourself, okay, you go to classes, you meet friends and stuff. But when everybody's pecking away at this, nobody's talking to anybody. Um, Terribly isolating, right? So, if anything, I would say this lack of human connection has only gotten worse. That's just how I see it. I'm just waxing poetic here, but I don't know. Do you know if you guys disagree with me on that or agree?
I disagree with you on, well, not disagree. Um, I was reading the story from the opposite perspective, right? I wasn't looking at it and seeing loneliness and isolation. I was looking at it and seeing really not jealousy, but I admire Doc and his ability. Like, he has so many people who care about him, and it seemed like everybody was wanting to connect more with Doc. Um, and it seemed like everybody was fighting, like not fighting isolationism, but they just, it wasn't on the docket.
Yeah, I see your point. Like one of the cool. I think I was really moved when I was reading it when the girls at the brothel made him that quilt of many colors. Right. I thought that was
Another biblical reference.
Yep, the coat of many colors. And Mac and the boys try to give him the 21 Tomcats or something. That's their gift. How do the rest of you got? How do the rest of you guys see this? Your comment added perspective to what I said. Definitely, Ron. It's not a completely depressing book, right? There is these glimmers of good throughout. Maybe we beat this theme over the head. One last theme I want to discuss with this before we part is just the theme of nature in and of itself in the book. Like you were talking about this earlier, Braun, when we were talking about the girls, the dead girl, the descriptions of all the animals and stuff. Yeah, this is the Cannery Row is a place beaming with life, right? Lots of the life is we can't really understand it in ways like human beings anthropomorphize nature, right? Like what's that word mean? Anthropomorphism. That's when we try to assign human attributes to animals and nature and things like that. So, but there's so much life in the book, so much life and death, right? Predator prey relationships. We get all the think about all the cats at Cannery Row, right? They're all gorged because they eat all the fish heads that get thrown out from the cannery. All the life that's in Doc's lab. The book ends, the very last passage of the book ends with this, the very last page. Doc wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, and the white rats scampered and scrambled in their cages. Behind the glass, the rattlesnakes lay still and stared into space with their dusty, frowning eyes. So even that, calling that the rattlesnake's eyes as frowning, right? That's anthropomorphism. We're assigning human attributes and onto animals. But I think Steinbeck just does that as a way just to at least give us a glimpse of what an animal might be thinking. Right? We don't know. We don't know what goes on in the brains of animals. But yeah, just nature as a whole is, like I said, this place is beaming with life, and so much life that isn't just humanity. This book definitely, this and To a God Unknown are both books that a lot of eco critics are discussing. Like this is a book that a lot of eco criticism scholars gravitate to, just because of how prominent of a role nature plays in the book. If anything, human beings kind of take a back seat. We're just another animal within nature. We're no more important than any of the other animals. So I kind of started this thread what did you get? Did you guys find any? What did you guys find curious about how nature was depicted in the novel?
Going back to the stink bugs.
With their butts in the air, right?
Yeah. See, I'm glad you used that term anthropomorphized, because I specifically put that term in my journal talking about the stink bugs too, and I thought it was interesting that, where is it at?
That's really early in the book. I think it might be the first couple of chapters.
Here it is, chapter 6. I think that people tend to, humanize things more than they need to, or more than they should. And I thought it was interesting that he said maybe that's why we can only use ourselves as a yardstick when talking about the stink bugs, and saying that they were praying. I thought maybe it's more likely that they were trying to bask in the sun's rays and warm up or something. But again, maybe I'm thinking too literally, and this guy is trying to connect more with nature. I don't know.
Yeah, is it the stink bugs that are trying to glorify God in their own way, right?
But who would they be praying to though? Are they praying to the Christian God, or they look up and see us and start praying to us? Or Mac and
don't stomp on me, right?
yeah. Or are they is that their natural defense pose before they start stinking?
Nature's way of saying, here it is, kiss it.
Yeah, there's so many. Like you mentioned chapter 6. I just turned to it. There's the beginning of chapter 6 is this like a very elaborate description of all the life that's in nature in Cannery Row.
Yeah, one of the scene changes. I love it.
I love this passage. It says, on the exposed rocks, the starfish emit semen and eggs from between their rays. Smell of life and richness, of death and digestion, of decay and birth burn the air. And salt spray blows in from the barrier where the ocean waits for its rising tide strength to permit it back into the great tide pool again. And on the reef, the whistling buoy bellows like a sad and patient bull. I love that description of the smell of life in the place. And Steinbeck has this reputation compared to a lot of other writers in the time period. He was very aware of our place within nature. Like we talked about Darwinism before. Um, Anything past the late 1800s is influenced by Darwinism. But yes, of course, Darwinism. If Darwinism did nothing else, whether you agree or disagree with it, it did show us that we're not as important in the grand scheme of the cosmos as we think we are. And yeah, Steinbeck definitely plays a lot of attention to nature. So if you guys have a bend for eco-criticism, a mind for it. Did you guys talk a lot about eco-criticism in your theory class?
Yes, we
It
do.
was one of the discussion points. Yeah.
Was it? What, you remember what types of stuff you read? Authors or anything like that? That's so last semester.
When we was going over it, we had a textbook that discussed the subject and then briefly mention writers and explain their approaches to it. As far as remembering who those writers were, be honest with you, I cannot remember them right now. But as far as actually reading their works and studying them, no, we didn't do that.
Just summary overviews, kind of.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, it's amongst this eco-criticism is probably one of the most hot button topics in literary studies right now. Like like literary studies does that. It goes through ebbs and flows, trends, and it's very much a hot trend right now. You can if you write about eco-criticism in your dissertation, that's a pretty easy job after you do it, just because a lot of colleges and stuff are looking for scholars who specialize in that. But Steinbeck is a writer begging for that type of analysis, I think. So if you got, and lots of people, like I showed you too, God Unknown had basically 0 articles written about it until eco-critics really started um, writing about it. So there's lots to be said about Cannery Row, Grapes of Wrath, right? Lots of stuff about nature and Grapes of Wrath. So if you have a mind for that type of thing, and maybe you want to develop a paper along those lines, that's something I can help you with, because I'm pretty well read on the subject of eco-criticism. It's not my favorite branch of literary studies, but I see the need for it, because it is important to talk about how we try to humanize everything, and that's a very limiting way, very limiting philosophy of looking at nature. And sometimes nature needs to put us in our place, right? And I think that's one of the best contributions eco-criticism's had to offer to the field of lit. Yeah, very good discussion of this book, guys. This book has a special place for me. I think it's such a good mix of comedy and tragedy and humor and sadness. Right? It's a very melancholy but hopeful book, as we were saying. So I think it was definitely a nice change up from the Grapes of Wrath after we spent the last 3 weeks on it. It was a nice change up for Steinbeck too. Steinbeck didn't want to keep writing the same book over and over. He wanted to move on to new things. Cannery Row was his first really great work after it. So maybe one of these days you guys will go to Monterey and get to see it. It's something. It's a sight to see. So
Sad to say, I Monterey, but I didn't know about the area at the time.
You've been to Monterey before? Yeah.
I lived down in La Jolla actually.
Did you?
For about 5 years and traveled all up and down the coast, just going to the beaches.
Yeah, it's a really nice beach if you go down there too. Um, like last time I went, that was back last March when I was going to the conference. Um, I just sat out on a rock and just stared out at the ocean for like 20 or 30 minutes. So, but next week we will begin the giant novel, and that is East of Eden. And just as an announcement, the 22nd of March, so we were supposed to read it over 4 classes. We're pretty much spending the whole month of March reading East of Eden. It's that big of a book. But the 22nd, that will fall. Wasn't aware of this when the semester started. We actually have they give you the Thursday and Friday off for that week for spring break. So what we'll probably do is we'll just keep going with the same calendar. We'll read the first quarter of the book next week, the second quarter the week after. We won't meet on the 22nd, but keep up with your reading like you would that week anyway. Then we'll finish the book on the 29th. So we'll keep with the same calendar, even though we won't meet on that class on the 22nd. So I just wanted to make you guys aware of that. I didn't know if you knew that we had a spring break or not. I didn't know until one of my students told me. So East of Eden is a great book. Take your time, savor it. It's an experience to read it. Like I said, I could have went with a lot smaller books in place of it, but I don't think you can have a Steinbeck class without reading it. So it's been probably 10 years or so since I've read it, so it'll almost be like I'm reading it for the first time. I don't remember a lot of the finer points, so I'll be going along on the ride with you. So one last thing, earlier in the week I sent out a bunch of those pressies you've done. I think I've sent the first 3. So I will give you guys one skip. So if you missed a week or something like that, I'll give you one drop. So whatever your lowest grade is at the end of the semester, I'll drop it. Of course, remember the week you present, you don't have to write one. Not a pressy, the reading journal. So yeah, so I'll drop one. And the one for Cannery Row, I'll give you guys to the weekend. You can do it up through Monday. So any last minute questions, comments, concerns before we depart?
Thank you for your compassion. I mean that.
What do you mean, just dropping a reading response grade?
Just being understanding of, I guess what we all go through and not being brutal as,
Right.
some professors can be, You
Yeah,
get us.
it wasn't too long ago when I was a student, so I get it. I want to, above everything, I wanted this to be a class that you guys enjoy. So really wanted to give you guys an appreciation for Steinbeck. So
I can assure you it is the most fun that I'm having this semester. I promise.
No cap.
Same here.
No cap. No cap.
So, well, you guys all have a great weekend, and I'll see you again next week.
Thank you. Have a good one.